of that. So I will translate into Montenegrin. So the first question we want to ask you, how do you feel? What are advantages of Montenegro? Значит, prva stvar koju bih htjeli da pitam vas, što je pozitivno u Crnoj Gori? Znači, koji je potencijal Crne Gore? Što je plus? Što je sa znakom plus u Crnoj Gori? Kako vi to osjećate?
Prvo, dobar dan svima. Ono što je plus u Crnoj Gori je prirodni potencijal.
So number one in Montenegro is nature and natural resources.
Kako jug, tako i sjever je jako bogat, ali što se tiče obrazovanja ima dosta nedostataka.
In the north and in the south, but if we are talking about education, education has a lot of let's call it challenges. Let's not call it problems, but challenges. Okay.
Djeca koja su učestvovala u radionici laboratorije budućnosti su iznosili da konkretno vezano za školu nedostaje tehnologija.
When we had this laboratory of future, the main thing that we saw was lack of technologies, and this is what kids mentioned.
Da, nedostaju pametne table. Sada već počeli smo da radimo na razvijanju kritičkog mišljenja.
Just now we have started to develop critical thinking,
gdje mogu da iznose svoje ideje, da budu kreativni, da učestvuju u raznim radionicama.
Where they can express their ideas and be creative.
Da. Međutim, to sve je lijepo na riječi, fale nam projekti, fale nam seminari, fali nam nešto gdje možemo doći do izražaja, odnosno sprovesti u djelo to što pričamo.
But it's just, let's say, it's easy to speak about it, but in reality, in Montenegro, it's very hard to organize different kinds of seminars, different kinds of workshops, and so we feel that for now, this is just words.
Da, nemamo podršku.
We don't have any support.
Da, na sjeveru su škole jako siromašne.
What about north? In the north, the schools are very poor.
Da, nemaju prevoz do škole.
They don't have any transfer to their schools, so they cannot get to schools.
Pješače dosta. Nema hrane u školi.
So they don't have meal at the school.
Mi bismo htjeli da organizujemo, odnosno da imamo kantinu u školi gdje će djeca moći besplatno da doručkuju.
We would love to have canteen at the school to provide them a meal for free, but it's not.
I prosto želimo da organizujemo nešto gdje će djeca doći do izražaja, oni su budućnost.
And we would like to organize a kind of space where kids can come and to express what they want in their nearest future. A što je pozitivno? Koji je potencijal? Kroz čega možemo da preskačemo tu trudnost? So through what potential we could overcome these, let's say, weak points?
U Crnoj Gori još uvijek je vaspitno-obrazovni sistem.
In Montenegro, it's a traditional, like, educational system.
Da, u srednjim djeci imaju mogućnost više smjerova srednjih škola da biraju. U gimnaziji imaju mogućnost nastavu na engleskom jeziku.
In gymnasium, so it means for when they finish their 9th grade. Yes, kad oni završe 9. razred, da? Gimnazija. In gymnasium, when they finish the 9th grade, they can select actually, and they can their classes are provided in English language, can be provided.
Da, na osnovu rezultata koje su do tog momenta ostvarili, mogu da svoje školovanje nastave u Americi ili bilo gdje se nudi mogućnost.
And then, according their results, their final results from the school, they can go even abroad, and for example, to study in America. A koji potencijal u državi, kako vi mislite? Sad smo pričali za školu, a sad kad dođe predsjednik Budve, mi bi htjeli još da ispričamo za potencijal države. So, because we have just discussed this about education with Lilia, but what about the country? So, the potential is in nafta, oil, yes, oil,
more, sjever,
sea, so natural resources and actually the nature itself. Okay, thank you so much. And I suppose we have some more minutes. And yes, and maybe we should thank you, Lily, so much.
Maybe there are some questions here or online.
Yes, let's have a look. If you have questions, we can ask immediately, or you have some proposal, and we can ask Pavel Luksha, because you see, yes, and once again, I just want to mention that we are talking about education, meaning that we all, adults, kids, teenagers, we all have this lifelong learning, and please don't mix it, education and the school. Education doesn't mean the school. Education for us means real life. And that's why if we want to change something in real life, we offer you to start with education. So let's ask Pavel Luksha if he is ready to share, not just to share his experience, but to give us some inspiration, because the first section is for us inspiration, and then it will be sharing experience. Just 1 second, we will find Pavel. Pavel is here. Pavel, thank you. I'm sorry that we change the time always, but it's life is like this. So thank you for being with us. Pavel is here.
That's how I wanted to start my talk. It's like we are living in the age of uncertainty, and we have to be ready for uncertainties.
Pavel, just a second. We don't hear you yet.
Hello?
Just a moment. Okay, now we hear you.
Yes. I wanted to say that's how I wanted to begin my talk. We are living in the age of uncertainties, and we have to be prepared for uncertainties. So that's exactly where we are right now. Can I ask you to mute your other microphone for a while, because it gives a lot of echo? Thank you. So thank you, first of all, for organizing this event. I was very enthusiastic. I was very excited by the opportunity offered by Igor, Nadezhda, and the team, that we are actually opening up a possibility that could be very encouraging both for the region and globally, because learning ecosystems is not just so to say sexy word. It's a new paradigm that becomes to emerge worldwide, and I wanted to speak a little bit about why this happens. First of all, why we see this transition occurring. If I can demonstrate my screen, please. Can you give me the rights to demonstrate my screen? Можно попросить меня дать права на демонстрацию экрана? All right, I will continue. First of all, I wanted to actually salute everyone, and I think that the idea of holding not really a conference, but more like a lab for the future, is the spirit of our times, because we don't need anymore what we can call frontal learning. Okay, I will probably model the older type of communication with you, but the right way of doing this is through co-creation. how we can engage with one another in finding opportunities for collaborating and transforming our society to become, let's say, society 2.0, the society for the future. And so first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about the last year, which probably has been transformational for everyone, whether we wanted it or not. And we recently, so to say, celebrated the year of a global lockdown, which has been a great shock for societies worldwide. And of course, for regions that are strongly dependent on tourism, like Montenegro, it was also not a very comfortable year because, of course, the lockdown blocked opportunities, and regions like Montenegro suffered. But all in all, we have to understand that this has been a manifestation of something more than just, let's say, a disaster, and a partially natural, partially probably man-made disaster that was brought onto our society and disrupted our normal flow of life. It's a manifestation of what we can call the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. The reality that we are now facing every day. And whether we like it or not, but crises like COVID will continue in the future. And we are entering what we can call the age of global turbulence, where some crises will kind of interfere and interact with other crises, strengthening each other, creating what some call a perfect storm, or where pandemics and conflicts and economic crisis and geopolitical crisis sort of strengthen each other and create a very uncomfortable dynamics for our societies. And of course, we can anticipate more waves of challenges and transformations coming ahead that we have to adapt to, and we probably have to anticipate. Given that in the next 3 days you will go through a number of laboratories for the future, or of the future, you will be able to discuss what are some of these drivers that call us to transform our education. So already COVID has started to trigger massive transformation that we can call digital transformation. Just to give you 2 examples, one of them is a manifold increase in the use of digital technologies in business. And it even provoked a joke of the idea that the digital transformation of businesses was not driven by company CEO or chief technological officer, but by COVID. Another maybe more, another fact that maybe is more close to your heart as educators is that last year we have seen what I call the largest ever experiment in the history of education, which was the fastest transition to a new mode of learning. It was just over 6 weeks that 1.5 billion of students moved into lockdown, and over 70% of them moved into new modes of learning, like online learning. So it was just 1.5 months that the whole system shifted to a new mode of learning. And this is the speed that has never been seen in the history of education ever. And I see this as an evidence of a larger transformation that is happening, that has been happening throughout the last decades and will continue to happen at the accelerated pace throughout this decade, driven by phenomena such as artificial intelligence or automated robotics or augmented reality and more. But this doesn't mean that our society is going to become all digitalized, that we are only going to move into digital jobs, tech jobs, and so on. What really is emerging is a new paradigm of human-centric economies. The fact is that technologies are taking more, are going to take more of what we can call robot-like jobs, routine jobs, standardized jobs, jobs that are not very inspiring for human beings. Whereas human beings are going to move into relational formats of work, driven by creativity, by search for unique contribution in the world. And in fact, we are already seeing that the paradigm of economy is shifting from what has been dominant throughout the 20th century, the consumer economy, towards what we can call participation-based economy, where people want to be with each other, not really consume. And this is one dimension that we have to look into. The other dimension that is really important is global challenges of the relationship between humanity and natural environment. So some of you probably have seen these charts, and one of them is called the Planetary Boundaries. It's an indication of some of the thresholds of, let's say, normal existence of our species on the planet that we need not to surpass. And in fact, in some of our activities as a civilization on the planet, we're already surpassing them many times. So in terms of destroying biological diversity, in terms of destroying soil and composition of atmosphere, increasing climate change, all of these create very serious threats for our civilization. And World Economic Forum that every year maps out risks that exist for our society. Last year has published a report that indicated that climate change risks and related risks rank higher than any other risks that our society has experienced, because they are very probable and very impactful. So these challenges we will have to deal with. They're calling for a shift in the paradigm of our economy and our society, to make our society nature friendly, to make it based on what is known as regenerative paradigm, the paradigm in which we search for ways to restore nature and to, rather than to destroy it, and to protect our natural capital. And what has been mentioned before me is that Montenegro is unique for its nature, the natural wealth, and it needs to be protected and used in a very, so to say, healthy way, long-term way, the way that any new model or emerging model for the Montenegrin economy needs to take into consideration that its main wealth is nature, and of course its history and its people. So given all these transformations, we need to think about a new model of education, the model of education that will help us adapt to these rapid transformations and to be able to not only to cope with them, but to really guide them, to be more proactive in changes that is happening, which means that we need to look at human beings more holistically. We need to understand that human beings are not just, let's say, hard skills for existing economies. They are not robots that are fit like cogs into a big machine of industrial civilization. They're really unique creatures that can contribute to positive changes and to self-actualization. So this calls for a different model where we focus on what is known as existential skills, the skills that give us, let's say, well-being for life. And in order to create these skills, including resilience, growth mindset, mindfulness, empathy, and more, we really need to cultivate learning environments that give us these skills in different learning contexts, and also based on student ability to act independently, to act in a self-reflective way, which really calls for a new paradigm of education. And this new paradigm starts to emerge in different contexts, in new schools, in local learning environments, in digitalized environments. We are stepping into what is known as learner-centered lifelong learning context. So if we look into this transition as happening as across the world and happening as something that also moves us into this lifelong learning perspective, that we are not only learning for a certain period, for example, in schools, we are learning for life and throughout life. This is actually what calls learning ecosystems into being, because learning ecosystems are spaces of learning, interconnected spaces of learning opportunities, of learning providers that allow each of us as human beings, and some of us collectively as organizations, as communities, as teams, to learn throughout life in different contexts, in different situations. And part of this transition that is happening right now across the world is that we begin to recognize that learning is not only happening in the context of schools or colleges or universities, it's really happening in the whole territory, in the whole area where humans live, like cities or regions or rural areas or bioregions. And all over the world, we start to see emergence of local learning ecosystems of interconnected players in education that start to operate and play with one another to support opportunities for learning, for developing existential skills, for lifelong learning, for cultivation of change makers, and so on. And if we ask ourselves why ecosystems emerge, we need, first of all, to see that the drivers of this emergence is the transformation of our civilization that is happening right now, driven by global challenges that we all experience anywhere on the planet. These global challenges call for a new human capacity, the ability to cope with these challenges that require us to be able to be more creative, to be more collaborative, to be able to cope with crisis and so on, and to be more diverse also, to have more diversity in our civilization. That requires new learning models that will be flexible, personalized, collaboration-driven, experience-based, and so on. And ecosystems are really like holding vessels for this new paradigm where these different types of learning and models of learning are interconnected and brought together on a scale of a city, a region, a nation, and the whole world. This is exactly how we can deal with many of these upcoming challenges. We can cultivate learning ecosystems that are localized, for example, city-based, to cultivate individual and collective capabilities to address these challenges that are emerging. And this will create local and global improvements in collective well-being, and also will create the opportunity to overcome these challenges such as environmental crisis we are facing. And our study of some of the leading cases of learning ecosystems around the world globally that we conducted throughout the last couple of years indicated over 40 cases of different ecosystems. All of them, I wanted to highlight this, are not only working to improve the quality of education. All of them are working to improve the quality of our collective well-being. And I think this is really important. We need to rethink education. Education is not only done for sake of creating skills or to support the learning of our children. It is done to improve the well-being and the quality of life in our societies. It can improve the quality of life in cities. It can help shift our economy towards regenerative paradigm. It can create more equality and so on. I'm almost finished.
Pavel, I'm very, very, very sorry. Yes, living in this VUCA world, Pavel, I'm very sorry because now the major of Budva has come and he has so few minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Pavel, for understanding. Can we just give 10 minutes to the major and let him go? Okay, not to, and then to continue.
I also have to go, so I'll finish and then I let Major speak. I need one more minute.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So this will be the last slide, and then my invitation to you throughout this upcoming conference. I invite all of you to think of the conference that is done here for the next 3 days as a learning lab, where people will be able to explore together not only the transition of a paradigm in education, but to see it as an opportunity for creating new paradigm for Montenegro, the development of Montenegro. Where and how can a new economy and identity of the region be in the next couple of decades? How can we cultivate skills that will, first of all, help us cope with uncertainty, but also create potential for change making at the scale of the region? Can Montenegro become a global attraction point for people that can be called a new elite, the people of that represent this human-centric economy, regenerative economy, global digital nomads that are already flocking to different beautiful places worldwide and bring wealth and opportunities with them? Can Montenegro be an attraction point? Last but not least, because you mentioned the natural wealth as one of the definitive point for Montenegro, can it become a global hub for, or at least a European hub for nature-based learning? And what would it mean for Montenegro to act in this capacity? I call you to explore these opportunities throughout the next 3 days. And I will later probably speak also on the leadership that is required to drive this, as you are stepping to discover the role of learning ecosystem tribalists. Thank you very much, and thank you for the team to initiate this conference. I now transfer to the next speaker.
Thank you, Pavel, so much. Thank you. So we are ready to start. Hello, we welcome the mayor of Budva. So Dr. Tsarevich is here. You know, I'm so proud personally that you decided to come. Hvala vam puno od samo od sebe. Hoću da zahvaljujem vas što vi ste došli. And just few questions I would like you to ask you as a person who is from business and who is from political, and who is just a person who was born here, as far as I know. Yes?
Još i osoba koja je rođena ovdje, ako smo mi u pravu, da ste vi baš rođeni ovdje.
Prvo se zahvalim na pozivu, dakle želim sve da vas pozdravim.
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me, and I want to say hello to everyone.
Želim da se ugodno osjećate u našem gradu.
I want you all to feel very comfortable and nice in our town.
I želim da se zahvalim vama kao Dukliju.
And I want to thank Dukli and you.
Vašim dolaskom u naš grad puno toga ste pozitivnog uradili.
Because your project coming and living in our city has done so many great things for the community.
I zato vam želim iskazati veliku zahvalnost i poštovanje i želju da u narednom periodu imamo još bolju saradnju kao grad.
So thank you, and you have all my respect, and I hope that in future we will have even more closer cooperation and more opportunities.
Thank you. So let's discuss educational hub.
Ajde da govorimo o ovome zašto smo ovdje.
I u suštini prvo pitanje, so the first question is how you feel, let's start from positive things. So how you feel the potential of Montenegro and the potential of Budva.
Crne Gore i samim tim potencijal Budve.
Za svih nas, nije samo za edukaciju.
Dakle, Crna Gora, možda sam ja malo oko sebičan, ali mogu da kažem da je jedan od najljepših dragulja na uopšte u svijetu kao reljef i kao teritorij.
First of all, maybe I'm not the best one to say it, maybe I'm a little bit selfish, but we can say that geographically wise, our country is the most stunning and the most precious gem in this part of Mediterranean.
I upravo to je jedan ogroman potencijal prirodni potencijal koji nudi Crna Gora.
So by itself, it's a great natural potential which is offered by Montenegro.
Međutim, nažalost, u ovakvim malim državama je politika, nažalost, dominantna i ona utiče na sve pore društva i na čitav
But
život.
unfortunately, in the small countries as Montenegro is, we can say that politics are a dominant sphere of life and society, and that it affects all the fields of social life.
To je situacija da uvijek kroz tu neku politiku ljudi koji vode državu dođu koji nisu iz posla, koji nisu naprijed ostvareni, koji nisu i moralno i materijalno ostvareni i to je prilika da kroz angažovanje u politici upravo ostvare sve to.
What I'm trying to say is that we have experienced inexperienced people who do not have experience in business becoming politicians and representing country in politics, which can lead to them having completely wrong intentions and goals through their political life.
Ja sam neko ko je iz biznisa ostvaren i moralno i materijalno došao u politiku.
I am someone who comes from business, who entered politics, both business accomplished in business and accomplished morally.
Ne sa željom da se bavim politikom, već moja politika je ekonomija.
Without a desire to be a politician and to do politics, and I can freely say that my politics is economics.
Tako možemo kroz ekonomiju doći na valorizaciju potencijala koji je u Crnoj Gori.
So this is exactly the way the right way to gain something so that we can develop economics through politics through economics.
Tako da mi sad imamo situaciju da je glavna privredna grana u Crnoj Gori turizam.
So currently the situation is that the major share of society and economics in Montenegro is tourism.
Što ljetni turizam, što zimski turizam.
Both summer and winter one.
Što ja iz ugla biznisa i ekonomije posmatram kao jednu vrlo rizičnu varijantu s obzirom da nikada ozbiljan biznis ekonomija ne može da počiva na samo jednoj djelatnosti.
I must say that from my perspective I find this to be very risky because I don't think that any successful economic can only rely on one branch of business.
Nažalost, evo, svjedoci smo zadnjih godinu i pol dana pandemija korona i to pokazala.
Unfortunately, the last year and a half of pandemics, I find that this last 1.5 year of pandemics has shown us exactly this.
Crna Gora je neravnomjerno razvijena.
Montenegro is not equally developed in all its parts.
Uglavnom je primorje dominantno.
So the coastline is dominant.
A zapostavljen je sjever.
And the north is completely of the maps.
Koji je po mom mišljenju upravo veći potencijal od primorja.
Which I must say find to be a greater potential even than a coastline.
Ja se nadam, a znam da vi i lično poznajete dobro Crnu Goru, jako je dobro da svi naši gosti vide sjever Crne Gore, koji je to potencijal.
I would love all your guests to also have the opportunity to see the potential of the north of Montenegro.
I koliko je propušteno zadnjih 50 godina s nesrazmjernim ulaganjem samo na primorje, da je takav potencijal ostao zapostavljen.
And actually what consequences the north of Montenegro has suffered in the last 50 years by only investing in the coastline and the south.
Znači, pored turizma koji je na primorju, Crna Gora može jako kvalitetno da razvija sjever sa poljoprivredom, sa razvojem tog agroturizma koji može da je 12 mjeseci.
So along with the tourism in the south, I find it very important for the country to develop tourism and agrotourism and agriculture in the north.
I proizvodnja zdrave hrane.
Which also includes production of healthy foods as a very important factor.
Vi dobro znate da danas živimo u svijetu kada je zdrave hrane sve manje i manje.
You all know that today we live in a world where healthy food is becoming a luxury.
I meni je davno jasno da je proizvodnja zdrave hrane budućnost.
And for many years now, I think that production of healthy food is a way to future.
A sjever Crne Gore nudi takav potencijal da to niđe u Evropi, a prošao sam i čitao na tako jednom mjestu, na takoj lokaciji, čitava Crna Gora, sjever Crne Gore nudi upravo to.
And I find the north of Montenegro to offer the greatest potential in this field. Even though I saw a lot of European countries, I think this is the greatest potential of the north.
Svi želimo da zdravo živimo i da dugo živimo.
We all strive to live healthy and live long.
I prosto smatram da nova vlada koja je formirana i za koju smo se svi zajedno ovdje borili da promijenimo.
And I find that the new government, which is now in power and that we all fought together to achieve,
nadamo se da će da prepozna
will
sve ovo čemu ja
recognize
govorim
everything that I am talking about.
i da će pored poljoprivrede, mi smo bogati sa rudama, rudarstvo po sjeveru, imamo puno rudnika koji su
And along with agriculture, that it will also recognize potentials of the mining in the north,
drvna industrija,
wood industry,
izgradnja ovih vjetroparkova, što se dijelom i radilo.
the windmills in the north,
hidrocentrala, mini centrala.
Vi mi pomozite slobodno. Many hydroplants, thank you.
Uz rigorozno poštovanje zaštite životne sredine.
But always having in mind the rigorous measures that we all must have take care of in honoring our nature.
Crna Gora može biti jedna destinacija u kojoj život teče i radi čitavih 12 mjeseci.
I believe that with all of this, Montenegro can become a destination which can work and for the whole 12 months.
I može se stvoriti ekonomski ambijent u kojem konačno naša djeca mogu da žive ovdje i da ne odlaze odavde u svijet i u druge.
And that all of this will be able to create an environment in which all our kids will not strive to leave the country but stay here.
Lično mislim da narod Crne Gore
I personally think that people of Montenegro
je jako inteligentan,
is extremely smart
i fizički sposoban
and physically capable
da može ovu Crnu Goru da stvori jednu destinaciju vodeću u Evropi.
to transform this country into a leading destination in Europe.
Ja sam to lično pokazao u mom biznisu privatnom koji je dug 33 godine.
I think I made a personal example by leading my own business for 33 years now.
I poznajući i gradeći prijateljstvo sa vama i sa gospodinom Nilom.
And building my friendship and my relation with you and my friend Neil Emilfar.
Vas pozivam da obiđete, to je ovdje na 15 minuta da
I
vidite.
invite you all to come and visit. It's 15 minutes away from here.
Da sve ovo što sam govorio ja imam kući na svom primjeru.
That everything that I told you about today, I have built in my own home, at my own home, 15 minutes away from here.
Pogotovo kada je proizvodnja zdrave hrane.
Especially if we talk about the production of the healthy
Moram
food.
da vam kažem da posjedujem 5 farmi.
I have to tell you that I am the owner of 5 farms.
Da imam proizvodnju i preradu mesa.
I produce and do local meat products.
Isto mlijeka i mliječnih proizvoda.
As well as milk and dairies.
i lijepog povrća zdravog,
and beautiful and healthy vegetables.
a imam i lijepe restorane.
And I have beautiful restaurants.
Gdje sve
So
to
you
možete
can
da
be
koristite.
educational hub. So you
Tako
should be hub.
da vi možete da budete primjer za sve ovo što mi danas ovdje.
Eto, ja vas pozivam da dođete.
Yeah,
Milena
I
poznaje.
invite you everyone to come and visit
I da budete moji gosti
and be my guests
i da vidite kako bi to mogla Crna Gora da
and see on my small example how the whole Montenegro could function this way.
uz jednu malu činjenicu da ovaj ambijent u kojem ja funkcionišem
But I must also say that the ambience where I live and work
su na ivici regularno
are on the verge of legal.
kada govorim o prirodnom ambijentu.
When I talk about nature,
A sjever Crne Gore i srednja i sjeverna Crna Gora su Bogom dani upravo za taj.
and the middle and the north of the country are God-given in this sense for this kind of business and development.
I ja ne bih nikada mogao da objasnim ono što ja želim
And I could never explain enough what I want
ako nemam primjer ovdje da pokažem kako
if
to
I
treba.
didn't do it myself at my own home and show it on my own example of how I think it should look like.
Jer moj život se bazira na činjenicama,
Because my whole life is based on facts.
ne na priči.
Not talk, but just facts.
To smo imali 30 godina za njih
I think we had it for the last 30 years here.
i imamo jednu katastrofalnu ekonomsku situaciju.
And we are all somehow caught in a catastrophical economical situation.
Raditi, proizvoditi, zdravo živjeti, to je budućnost.
Work, produce healthy and live healthy, that's the future.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your openness. Thank you. Okay, so you see now we have, let's say, logistic step that we should act. And this is what we want to offer you. The next our step is collective session. So not to talk too much. It was 1 hour. Yes, we are ready to organize collective session. So yes, Vika.
Okay, let the technician speak a couple of words. So now we have a 10 minutes break. Yeah, just refresh yourself. We need some time to prepare the place online and offline. Yeah, for the session. So we have 10 minutes, and then we gather here again. And those who are online, gather online, of course. Hello to everybody. Yeah, and I know I'm just encircled with the Zoom. I know where it looks. So yeah, and after 10 minutes, we will have a kind of analytical session. Yeah, and we are now well prepared with the help of our Montenegrin friends. We know everything about the situation in Montenegro now. Yeah, and will be just not a challenge, I suppose. So, and if you just connected in a minute and you missed the speeches of the mayor and Lily's speech, so you also have 10 minutes to prepare for the session, to Google speedily something about Montenegro to get in, because our session is going to be rather analytical. We will think on some advantages and disadvantages of Montenegro to be the territory of educational ecosystem, where educational ecosystem starts and arises. Yeah, and we will give some advices to the local educational organizations from where to start, with what to start, to build the educational ecosystem. So we will be huge experts. Yeah, thank you ever so much. 10 minutes break.
Thank you. Announce that the next speaker for our conference will be the Ross Hall, the founder of the Weaving Lab. And please, Ross, you can tell us a few words about yourself, and we are happy to see your presentation and to listen for you. Okay, just a moment. The sound is not on yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now you can speak.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much, Igor, and it's a great pleasure to see everybody today. My name is Ross Hall. I'm English, but I'm currently living in Switzerland and working with the Jacobs Foundation, or the Jacobs Foundation, where we are focusing on the creation of learning ecosystems in which every child is learning to thrive together. And what I'd like to do today is just to spend 15 to 20 minutes explaining to you the approach that we are taking to creating learning ecosystems. And hopefully this will give you some ideas, some examples, and I would also be very open to any questions or criticisms that you might have of the model. I should say that we are quite new to this as a foundation. Personally, I've been working around the idea of learning ecosystems for more than 12 years, I think, or maybe even 15 years. But it's only now, I think, that the idea is really starting to take hold. And it's only now that we're really starting to understand how to do this kind of work. And that's what I'm going to focus on mostly today, which is how do you create a thriving learning ecosystem? To do that, let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen now? I'll assume that's, yes, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so first of all, what do we mean by a thriving learning ecosystem? Well, the word ecosystem, which I'll come on to in a moment, is prefaced here by the word thriving. And it seems to me and to many of us that this is really what we need to be focusing on ultimately. The idea that we are currently facing a whole range of personal, social, and environmental crises, from increasing poverty and increasing inequity and increasing extremism, slavery, unemployment, depression, anxiety, violence, pollution, resource depletion, climate change, biodiversity loss, the list goes on and on. We are now facing a combination of unprecedented crises which are actually threatening our survival. And my belief is that if we wish to survive, we should aim to thrive together. We're also, of course, living in a time of unprecedented volatility and complexity and uncertainty and ambiguity. And on top of that, organizations, in order to survive in this changing world, are now pushing leadership out to the edges. They're distributing leadership. They're becoming shape-shifting organizations. So the world of employment is changing. And on top of that, the rise of AI and automation and the fourth industrial revolution creates further change in economies. And on top of all of that, we are hyper-connected, fueled by massive population growth, urbanization, and migration. We are living closer with each other than ever before, and we're all facing diversity and heterogeneity more than we've ever felt before. So we are, in essence, all faced with these huge challenges. And it's within that context, I believe, that we need to fundamentally transform the idea of education systems so that we are thriving, not only surviving in these new times. Now, when we ask people, and I've spent many years traveling the world and asking people, if you take any child in any community, and you recognize that they're learning with other kids in that community, and you ask them the question, what do they really need to learn in order to thrive together? We get the same answers coming everywhere. And I've asked this question in very remote villages in Africa, all the way through to very expensive apartments in New York City. You tend to get the same answers. And what people will usually say is they'll say, well, kids need to learn to take the lead. They need to learn to collaborate with each other, to contribute, to make positive change, to take action, to take responsibility, to make difficult decisions, to solve complex problems, etc. But when it gets really interesting is people then start to say, well, kids need to learn to be empathic and self-aware and we-aware and open-minded and present and reflective, possibility-minded, system-minded, thoughtful, wise. People will say that kids need to learn to be proactive, to be adaptable, growth-minded, curious, creative, resourceful, courageous, resilient, and so on. You usually get about between 50 and 100 of the same things coming through. And there are two really interesting things about the responses that you get to that question. On the one hand, people say that in order for kids to learn to thrive together, there's a very common set of skills, knowledge, but a lot of these words are being words. Notice that: being empathic, being self-aware, being resilient, being creative. There's a very strong emphasis on the idea of being. Now that suggests there's a strong idea that learning is a process of being and becoming, and maybe even learning needs to be rethought as a process of becoming. In other words, learning is not just about knowledge, it's not just about skills development, it's about being and becoming. The other interesting thing is when you contrast that list with what's actually happening in schools, you'll tend to find a very big difference. So there's agreement that children and adolescents and adults need to develop a very wide range of knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and ways of being if they're going to learn to thrive together. And these things are not currently being taught in schools or developed in schools for the most part. Now, the next thing I would ask then is, okay, so if we agree that they're the kinds of things that people need to develop, what are the kinds of experience that they need to have in order to develop these things? Because it's through our experience that we develop or that we become empathic, self-aware, etc. And what's interesting is, again, you get the same answers. And this might be something you want to discuss amongst yourselves at some point. People will say, okay, so the most empowering experiences for young people are questioning and reflecting, exploring, experimenting, failing, making, moving, meditating, playing, being in nature, being in the community, being trusted. Again, you get the same set of answers about the kinds of experience and environment which are most important to offer people in order to develop these things. What's interesting, again, is how these kinds of experience really differ from what's happening in schools again. Nobody ever says the way to empower a young person is to put them behind a desk with a teacher up front and a textbook in front of them and get them to remember what's in the textbook and then regurgitate what they've remembered in an exam. What we know is that every child, every adolescent needs to be benefiting from a wide range of learning experiences and environments. Not only that, we know that every child and adolescent has their own learning needs and preferences. And so we need to move from this one-size-fits-all model to a model in which every child can access a wide range of learning experiences and environments that are specifically designed and provided or adapted to their unique learning needs and preferences. And that means inside and outside of school. Why does it mean inside and outside of school? Because when we ask people, who is it who influences the kind of learning experience that we're talking about, people very quickly will say, well, it's parents and families. That's often the first response you get. So we need to involve parents and families in this. Of course, people say it's school teachers and school leaders and school staff, the caretaker, the dinner ladies, etc. Everybody who works in the school is critically important in this kind of provision. But then you've often got out of school educators, youth workers, for example. Friends and peers exert a critical influence. Health and social workers are often highly influential. So are culture makers, sometimes libraries, museums, or arts and music providers. Community leaders are often important, and in many places, religious or faith leaders are also important. Now, this is not a comprehensive list of the people who have the greatest influence, but this is an example of those people who have a very direct and important influence on the learning of young people. And these people, therefore, need to be aligned to this idea of learning to thrive together. And these people need to be working together to help young people learn to thrive together. And these people, therefore, need to be skilled to help young people learn to thrive together. Now, when you ask the question a bit further and you nudge, you say, well, is this everybody who's important? People will say, well, no, hold on a minute. What about those people who have an indirect influence, but nevertheless a really profound influence? This is what I would call second line actors, teacher trainers, teaching unions, policymakers, of course, education administrators and auditors, the media have a huge influence, researchers, employers, funders, etc. Again, this isn't comprehensive. But again, you get this idea that there are all sorts of different actors who are exerting a very strong influence on the learning of young people. And if we want young people to learn to thrive together, these actors also need to be aligned to that idea. They need to be collaborating, and they need to be skilled in doing their work. So we start to paint this picture of a learning ecosystem in which everyone is working and learning together to provide a wide range of learning experiences and environments that are explicitly designed to help everyone in that system learn to thrive together, to learn to become empathic, to become self-aware, to become creative, thoughtful, wise, resilient, and so on. So essentially, the picture that starts to emerge here is a community which is based on trustful relationships and dynamic relationships through which knowledge is flowing, resources are flowing, learnings are flowing. This is a trustful, diverse community working and learning together to ensure that everyone is learning to thrive together. So that's the picture of a thriving learning ecosystem. The question though is, how do you bring one of these about? Now I'm going to share I haven't got too much more, but I'd like to share with you some slides that we are currently using to move in this direction in Ghana. And this approach is based on collective impact approaches in different countries, in different sectors, so not specifically in education. And in fact, there are still not so many of these kinds of approach in education. There are some really interesting ones, but not too many. But the idea is that if we want to create this kind of thriving learning ecosystem, we first of all need to find the change leaders who are already existing and working in the system. Now, a change leader I define as someone, first of all, who is aligned to the vision of a thriving learning ecosystem. Somebody who is collaborative by nature, so they don't need to be the hero in the story. They want to do this with other people, and they know they need to do it with other people. And somebody who has influence, somebody who can influence policy, somebody who can mobilize money, or someone who can mobilize people, people who can influence thinking, innovators and entrepreneurs, or conveners and weavers, people who weave people, projects and places together. We need to find these change leaders at every point in the system. And you need to invite those change leaders with young people into what we would call a change community. This is an active community of change leaders who represents the wider ecosystem. Now, to create that change community, or rather to weave that change community, you need to find people in that change community who are particularly aligned and particularly collaborative and particularly influential, and people who have the time to join a change team. And to function as a change team, we need to find people who are particularly aligned to operational work. And that's the backbone team. So in this model, the backbone team essentially operationalizes a change team. The change team weaves the change community, and the change community models or becomes their desired learning ecosystem. So the idea here, if we take our example in Ghana, is that we are currently in the process of funding a backbone team and building their skills so that they can act as the operational unit for creating a change team. That change team weaves these different members of the change community, and we help build their capacity to and their awareness so that they then define their desired learning ecosystem, and then they set about modeling and creating their desired learning ecosystem. Now, if we just turn that on its side, what does that mean in practical steps? So what have we done in Ghana? We started by mapping the system to understand how does the system currently work and who's in that system that might qualify as a change leader. We then set about writing what we call a draft call for change. This is a 2-page document that essentially sets out what we can see in Ghana and what we think needs to change and why, and how we think we want to bring about change. We then socialized that call for change with the government. So we made sure that there were critical actors in government, including the Minister of Education, to say, do you agree with this call for change? Does it align with your own priorities? And then we identified and interviewed change leaders throughout the system, sharing that call for change and asking them, do you align with this? How does your work fit into this model? What would you like to change in this call for change? What's most important in this call for change? So through this process of interviewing change leaders, we were able to do two things. First of all, refine the call for change. And secondly, find change leaders who are really aligned to this approach to change, so to build energy amongst change leaders for change. That's allowing us now to find change leaders that we're going to bring in to create the backbone team and the change team, which will then allow us, and we've just started this, to convert or refine the call for change into a more robust, concrete, strategic plan for Ghana, a plan that is defined and owned by the backbone team, the change team, and the change community, which will then allow us to build an engagement process for the wider change community. By the way, we are exploring the implementation of a change leadership program, which is a professional program supported and provided by universities in Ghana, so to almost legitimize the community. And through that program, we aim to build the capacity of that change community through this change leadership program, so that our aim through this process is a process of weaving together the different change leaders, getting them to align to a shared purpose, helping them to collaborate for systemic change, and encouraging them to learn together to bring about their own desired learning ecosystem. And once we're there, our hope is that that community will then be defining evidence-informed projects that are mutually reinforcing and fundable, and so that those projects together contribute to the creation of their own desired learning ecosystem. So that's what we're doing in Ghana. As I say, this is an approach that we've drawn from different approaches around the world. It's very much an experiment. I'm sure things will go wrong, and I'm sure it won't roll out in such a clean way, but at least that gives you some ideas with which to work, I hope. Thank you all very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ross, very much. We want now to listen also to some practical experience of weaving regional learning ecosystems. And then after lunch, we're going to use that experience and the framework that Ross shared with us to continue our work on learning ecosystem hub here in Montenegro. So thank you once more, Ross. And I invite Luis Camargo to share with us the experience of their work in Colombia and weaving in regional ecosystem in Colombia, which also has a beautiful nature, and it's something similar to Montenegro. And of course, there are a lot of differences. Luis, please.
Thank you, Igor.
Yeah.
And hello to all of you. I am definitely really happy to be here with you all and have the opportunity to share a little bit of what we've been doing in Colombia and with you guys. And I'm actually sorry not having to be, or the possibility to have gone to Montenegro. I hope in the future we will be meeting in person. As Igor said, my name is Luis Camargo. I'm the founder and director of an organization called OPEPA, which is Organization for Environmental Education and Protection. And this organization was founded 23 years ago with the objective of reconnecting people to the earth in order to accelerate the transition towards sustainable and regenerative communities. In these last 23 years, we've been working mostly focused at youth and children. We've worked with over 120,000 students, mostly in the field. So over 600,000 days in the wilderness with students and teachers learning. And we've worked and had the opportunity to work in the Americas and also in some other territories around the world. And I think part of what we have learned in these 23 years, which will lead us to me presenting you one specific example, is that, you know, it's actually a discovery that is quite funny for me, because we are the fish that live inside the fishbowl. We are the humans that live on the earth. And we live really in a living system that is totally magical. You know, it's a planet that's full of life and life that's interconnected. You know, our planet is actually the true essence of a learning ecosystem. You know, it has co-evolved for billions of years. And from elements and just basic elements to cells to life forms that are actually very complex and intricate, and that relate with each other in very incredible forms. So it is very important for us to understand that, you know, life creates conditions conducive to life, like Janine Benyus says. She's the founder of biomimicry and the biomimicry movement. But, you know, this short phrase is really important for learning ecosystems, because learning ecosystems are all about replicating how life co-evolved on Earth. And it co-evolved by creating conditions conducive for life to evolve. And this might sound, you know, really simple, but it's actually something that we have forgotten. So this is a really key part of what we're doing. And when we're talking about education, you know, this quote from David Sobel is really neat, because if we really want children to flourish and to become truly empowered, let us allow them to love the earth before we ask them to save it. So for us, it's also really important to recuperate the capacity to fall in love with the earth. In the last decades, humans have separated, you know, day in, day out, further from nature and from feeling they are part of nature. And this has actually created a gap in our understanding and our capacity to relate to the earth, and in the same time, in our capacity to relate with other people. So this is actually one of the key issues we want to break. How do we reestablish our capacity to fall in love with the earth and to save it? And in this process, we discovered Joanna Macy's work of active, you know, of reconnecting and building to activate hope. And active hope is actually a concept where, after we reconnect deeply and we fall in love, we realize and we accept the things we have done and the pain that's there, but only to realize the opportunities that we have forward, so we can start acting as change makers, like Ross mentioned. So activating hope in this way is really critical too. So in this process of these years, we have discovered actually 3 pillars that we use in creating nature learning experiences. And the first one is the pillar to reconnect deeply with nature. So we need to focus on connecting deeply with nature and allowing or bringing experiences for children, youth, and people to connect deeply with nature. This is an aspect of building and expanding our concept of empathy. So we can talk about empathy with other people, but sometimes it's much more difficult to understand how we can build empathy with other living beings and nature. So connecting deeply is one of these really important pillars that we start building since we're born. So access to nature, contact with nature, experiences in nature, and acknowledging nature as one of the co-inhabitants of our world is fundamental. And this will bring us to the capacity of a realization that in sense is called the interbeing. So it's our capacity to realize that we are nature, that we are part of everything else, that we are deeply interconnected and interdependent. Once we're deeply connected or we start building this connection, the second thing we realized is we need to awaken the naturalist within everyone. So this really focuses on enabling the capacity to sense our surroundings, to sense our interiors. So we're not talking only about the visible, so the plants or the trees or people and cultures. We're talking about the invisible also. We're talking about energy flows, patterns, and what happens in the interactions in living systems. And in order to awaken the naturalist, we really need to ingrain educational systems and learning systems of opportunities for awe and curiosity, to allow discovery to be one of the key mechanisms of learning. And the third pillar is actually building experiences to act for regeneration. So how can we give, especially youth that are connected, that have learned how to sense, opportunities to express leadership in a different way? Leadership that allows them to become stewards and planetary citizens. Leadership that allows them to actually bring that knowledge of interdependence and interconnections into propositive actions that allow to build a better ecosystem or a better environment. And this leads us to what we call activating the regenerative capacity or regenerativeness in individuals. So as you can see, the regenerative capacity requires us to start amplifying our interbeing capacity. It requires us to activate our capacity to identify health in relations and in energy flows. So activate our collective well-being and understand the role of diversity, both ecological and cultural diversity, in building thriving ecosystems. If we think of a forest, and if we think of a millenary forest, one of the most old and thriving forests on the planet, it's inevitable to think of a forest that's full of diversity. And this is a key aspect of it. Also, the relationships in this forest are relationships of cooperation, mutualism, and those are the predominant relationships. So relationships tend to want to harmonize the system. And this is one of the key learnings. We need to focus on relations when building, learning ecosystems, because relationships are the glue that actually allow us to call ourselves an ecosystem or to build an ecosystem. So building relationships in ecosystems that include humans is all about understanding that we relate many ways. Three critical ones are our relation to ourselves, our relation to others, and our relation to nature. And if we really work as learning ecosystems and educational systems to build in the capacity to come into right relation, like many ancestral communities around the world speak about, we would actually start harmonizing back into the living system and be able to build learning ecosystems that promote the well-being of all life in the planet. In Colombia is a country of about 40 million people. great biodiversity. It's a country, one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. We have access to the Pacific Ocean, the Caribbean or the Atlantic Ocean. We have the Amazon rainforest. We have the Orinoco Basin and the savannas, and we have the Andes. So we have every ecosystem imaginable. And with that, we have over 86 ethnic communities that are very independent, more than 23 full linguistic groups. So diversity is the essence of Colombia. And that comes also with challenges. When you have so much diversity, you have sometimes complications. So we realized that diversity also in Colombia, especially in Bogota. Bogota is a city of 10 million inhabitants almost, so almost a quarter of the population of Colombia. And we not only have diversity in nature, but we have cultural diversity and economic diversity. And this creates a really complex environment to actually build the learning ecosystem. Or actually the history, what it has done is separate each group in very fragmented small groups. So when we realized this, we figured out that in order to create a learning ecosystem in Bogota, we needed to do a couple of things. So a school, basically this is a regular private school focused at girls mostly, and organizations like OPEPA and another organization working with the land management of the mountains next to Bogota, and our organization working in education got together and said, how can we empower and build this learning ecosystem? We realized that the only way was to start modeling the forest. By modeling the forest, I mean creating diverse actors that can start collaborating and co-evolving into something that helps the system thrive. So create the conditions for life to thrive. And in this case, we also invited national organizations that are working on biodiversity conservation and knowledge. We invited the Botanical Garden of Bogota, and we invited other organizations and started building what we call the Red de Colegios Cerro de Bogotá, which is the mountain school network of Bogota. Bogota is surrounded by mountains. So this was very pertinent because we wanted to anchor the learning community in our relationship with the mountains as a city. And by doing this, we actually invited schools from all over the city, independently of the territory where they were, the amount of money they had or not, the amount of access they had or not. We tried to create really a space where everyone was invited and was invited to start building this learning community, this learning forest. And one of the bases of learning was sharing, and sharing what actually joins us and not start talking and sharing what separates us. So finding the commonalities was a key point. And one of the commonalities that's most important in any territory is earth and is the land around us. So we used nature around us as the anchor, as the anchor and the, let's say, as the place where we could meet and build together knowledge, experiences, and share. And in this process, we started to also bring people to start strengthening their relationship with that nature that's around us. Obviously, a city like Bogota has affected many ecosystems. So let's work in restoring our relations and restoring our ecosystem. So as kids restore nature and forests, they also learn and start working in restoring their relationships with themselves and their relationship with other kids of other schools, of other social income levels or access levels. And this was really a great experience because it allowed us to start generating conversations that were very different to regular conversations. It allowed us to start building conversations of connection and conversations of collaboration. We started with a small group. We started with 18 schools and a bunch of students, a bunch of teachers and principals, and started creating groups where principals started sharing, teachers started sharing, and students started sharing. And then as we went into nature, we started blending adults and youth and all people to start sharing within diversity. And this generated traction, the traction to start attracting others and other schools. So we started with 18 schools. Within 3 years, we had over 100 schools in the network, working together, participating in action together, and participating in conversation together. And this really allowed for kids to start regenerating and restoring all their relations. And I think this is a key aspect of building a learning community. In this was really instrumental, giving tools to teachers and parents to start bringing that language of nature into their homes and into their classrooms, and being able to take the classroom out into nature. So these two concepts are critical because it allows us to restore our relationship with nature. And in the process, considering the city is so large, we realized we should use nature and watersheds as our main ways of organizing people within the territory. So watersheds help to create nodes, and those nodes help people to start organizing locally to work towards local actions. And we also have used citizen science, because we're talking about youth and kids that are in school, to connect territory with schooling and with the conversations of how we steward our land. So citizen science focused on quality of water, for example, using the nodes and the watersheds, and having students with multi-groups of different places, having that experience of taking the samples and looking at them, talking about the importance of water and the relationship to water between groups. And this has been really, really a key aspect. Other things we have done is use nature as the anchor point to learn and to discover the magic that's around us, the magic of life. So birding in multi-groups and using tools like iNaturalist to start bringing all the individuals into collective groups that can recognize, identify, and start creating the inventories that they are actually going to use to learn and to share with other kids the nature we have around us. So this has been really nice. And in the process, we realized we were weaving actually a learning ecosystem like Ross was talking about, where all these schools were attracted, started getting connected. We had representation of the whole city, and we had representation of all income levels, work levels, history levels in one community. And they were all speaking the same language, the language of good relations, the language of collaboration. So with this, I would like to invite you, because I think Montenegro, from what I've seen in maps, is incredible. And you have so many resources. I think it is important to start looking at the resource not only in education, but also in nature. Where are your parks? Where are your reserves? Where are your wilderness areas? And how can you really create a learning ecosystem that includes nature as one of the learning environments where people can start speaking the same language and start sharing, discovering, and getting inspired. By creating these multi-level conversations and interactions, we will generate a learning community that benefits individuals, the community, and the environment. And this is ultimately talking about well-being or universal well-being. So I invite you to really activate your capacity to fall back in love with nature and bring nature into the center as a neutral learning ground that will inspire learning ecosystems to build, talk, and thrive together. Thank you.
I'm afraid that Luis didn't hear your applause, so you can reply. Ross, oh, sorry, Luis. Yeah, we're beginning to be tired still. We really thank you for that speech. Seeing what you have done and what you're doing in Colombia inspires us to think what are we capable to do here. We have the last speaker at this session. And after lunch, we will work with what they have told to us. We will start to weave an ecosystem here. And now I want to invite Lev Gardon, with the experience of learning ecosystem in the other side of the globe. I mean, Izhevsk, Siberia, Russia. Lev, please join us. I know you're
how is
here.
the sound? Do you hear me well? Okay, excellent. Well, let me start a demonstration of a screen. I think that should be it. Okay. Do you see it well, the slide? Okay, excellent. Well, if anything goes wrong, just tell me with your words, because I don't see you, I see the slides. So let me quickly introduce myself and what I'll be talking about. Well, first of all, big thanks to Ross and Luis. It's amazing to listen to you guys and also to see a lot of connections between what we do and what you do, albeit on a different scale and in a different environment. I'm coming up with a very sort of practical project as well, which is evolving right now. So what I'll be talking about, we're doing every day, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's not a finalized project. It's sort of an evolutionary process in making. And I'll quickly share how we're developing an integral education, or rather integral development ecosystem, as the heart of new creative economy. I am part of Izhevsk city community. It's not really Siberia, it's sort of midway between Moscow and Siberia, but in the middle of Russia. And we've been participating in a couple of programs recently, including the Agency for Strategic Initiatives program in Russia for creating what's called in Russia creative clusters or creative hubs. And I'll quickly share what it is in my next slides. This is one of the famous characters in Russian cinema. And in the original sort of movie, he says, smile, sirs, smile. But I changed it to learn and develop, learn and prosper, because we believe that true learning, which leads to wisdom rather than knowledge, sort of regular knowledge. So true learning creates prosperity. And this is what Luis was talking about very eloquently with the example of natural ecosystems and really collaborating with nature itself. Why are we talking about the city as a learning ecosystem? I'll share in a minute, but we look at any city as a large sort of learning ecosystem already, and our really key goal is to understand how we can really unlock all the potential of learning within a city or within a village. Actually, it doesn't matter the size, because we look at all cities and villages as complex living systems. And this is the work we've been doing with Marilyn Hamilton, who is one of the authors in the integral city development movement. What's interesting, if you look at the Earth, at the planet Earth from sort of high above, you don't see the borders of the countries, you only see the energy which is generated by people and people's activity. And most sort of bright spots on the map or on the planet actually are the cities where people collaborate, where people live together. And this is very important because this is what gives a necessary energy also for change, which we want to sort of execute on a large scale. I've been doing quite a few things before I came to this topic. I was working in sort of large multinationals in about 35 countries all over the globe, and then came back to Russia, was leading a university for 4 years, a private university. And then about 8 years ago, I moved sort of to the this city development area, but not so much, the urban studies like the infrastructure, but more the social urbanism, how people interact and how they build living systems together. As you know, there is such things as competition. Some people don't like it, but it's true. In addition to cooperation, still there is a lot of competition. And what it means in our current reality is that cities which fall behind or villages which fall behind, they start losing the energy. And it comes in the forms that talent, young professionals or old professionals, sort of the talented people, leaves the city for places where they could better realize their potential, and also capitals, investments, either leaving or not coming to the city. So cities today and villages have to work hard to get better, faster than their peers, which means that the speed is also important. Otherwise, and it's not only the speed of some, very practical sort of things, but it's also the speed with how we develop our awareness, how do we develop our sensitivity, and all the other meta skills we'll be talking about. So it's very sort of holistic issue. Looking at the city problems, and in Russia there are quite a few. We always remember what we think Albert Einstein has said, that you can't solve a problem on the same level of consciousness that created it. You should start with yourself, and when you change yourself, the problem will disappear. So how we feel it's important to work with those big social issues or economic issues or ecological issues, we use what's called integral approach. Many people know Ken Wilber and his work. There are many different integral approaches, and the AQUAL, all quadrants, all levels, is a very sort of useful map. If you don't know it, definitely take a look somewhere on the internet. AQUAL stands for all quadrants, all levels, and it basically talks about different perspectives or dimensions which you could sort of research and then act upon in any kind of situation. We also, using the integral approach, we mapped the city as a complex system with 8 key dimensions. Of course, there are more, but we decided to look at 8, and it starts with meanings and culture. This is what drives our actions. Then it's communications between people, between groups of peoples. It's communities, people as individuals, then administration and management of the city, different technologies, infrastructure, and resources. So when we want to develop a city as a complex living system, we definitely need to look at all of those levels at least, if not more, and work in parallel with basically developing meanings, communications, etc., not only infrastructure or technologies, as many people in key sort of administrative roles normally do. When we look at people who inhabit the cities or villages, we definitely need to see that every individual has many sort of aspects or dimensions, and we focus on 6 principles of them. We all have a body, right? A body, and we definitely have an energy, what's called life energy, or your living sort of tonus. And the third one is ego, in a good sense. It's basically your individuality, what makes you different from other people. Then the intellect or intelligence, the soul. The soul relates to both your sense of purpose in life and your understanding of who you are, what you are here for, but also to such things as emotional intelligence, your relations with people, and many other things. And then the spirit is your connection with the with the global sort of life, with the universe itself. And many sort of scientists in Russia, they all said in one voice that universe is a living being, as said sort of shamans in, Latin America and many other people all across the world. So if you want to truly work with living systems, you should first understand that we all, each one of us, is a living system itself, and get to understand who we are, how it all works, and then we'll be able to connect to other people, because on the level of soul and on the level of spirit, we can connect very easily. But when we live on the level of sort of individual ego, it's really very hard, and only nature could help us, as Louis mentioned before. One of the companies, it's actually one of the sort of fast food companies, it's Burger King, but they had this conference, and we thought it's a very good point to think about, cities and learning ecosystems. they say the new CEO, Chief Executive Officer, is really the Chief Energy Officer. It's a leader who makes you come alive. It definitely relates to both educational context and the city context and any context. Today, we all feel that energy is a lacking sort of resource for many of us, because there is a lot of stress, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of change. And so each one of us, when we start thinking about how we operate, how we manage our own energy, the energy of our team, our company, or an organization, or the energy of our city, we really become what's I think it was Ross who mentions, or maybe Louis, we become both leaders and the stewards who sort of drive the positive change in our communities. Meta skills, we mentioned it already today before. There are many of them, but I sort of listed here just a few, which we believe are very important for thriving economies, thriving social systems in today's world. Definitely empathy. Without empathy, everything falls apart. So ability to create connections, listen and hear, create long-term productive relationships. We focus a lot on awareness. I represent sort of a community called Living Cities. It's a pretty large now movement in Russia and beyond. And we believe that the foundation of a living city, of a thriving city, is the awareness of its citizens. Because when we are aware of what's going on inside ourselves, what's going on outside of ourselves, we can make smart, sort of a wise choices and create collaboration and do many different other things. Without awareness, if we just follow the rules, it's pretty useless, because we cannot work with complex systems following the simple rules, and it's very difficult to create complex rules in a sort of dynamic moving world. So awareness is a key issue we want to develop in our learning ecosystem, which I will talk about in a second. Collaboration, communication is another one, because we are not alone. We work with other people. Actually, we live with other people. So we need to understand each other, work together, etc. And the last one in the bottom, it's the ecosystemic leadership. What it means that we work not only in a linear fashion with different particular individuals around us, but we need to work with different systems on different levels of complexity. And to do this, we need to develop this complexity within ourselves. A few words about a new creative economy, because we are talking about learning ecosystem, which we develop right now in a context of new creative economy. United Nations established the 2021 as the International Year of Creative Economy for the purposes of sustainable development. And creativity, well, we all know it, so I won't even mention what it is, but it fuels creative economy. And creative economy is right now a worldwide trend in economic development. In sort of developed nations worldwide, what's called creative economy accounts for about more or less 10% of GDP. So it's a pretty substantial part of, our economic life. And there are different systems of thinking. There are creative industries, a British way of looking at it. There are about 14 of them, like design, architecture, music, literature, etc. There are 30 creative industries in the United Nations model, but we went much further on. We said, no, we look at the economy as a way of organizing social relations that aim at creating value through unlocking and capitalizing on human creative potential. And what it means is that every person, not only a musician or a writer or some researcher, but every person has this incredible creative potential inside. And if we take this as a key idea and start looking at how we can unlock this creative potential in every person around us, and we definitely look at a lifelong education, so not only children, but every person, we believe it will unlock immense amount of energy, and we see it already in what we do. And so a couple of additional points here, and it could be, I think it could be very helpful to Montenegro as well. So if we think about new creative economy, it's a term which we coined ourselves about half a year ago. So it basically helps unlocking this inner energy through different types of educational, learning, developmental, communication, collaboration, and other type of activities. People I don't know about other countries, but in Russia, they have this term creative cluster, basically an economic term, which we bring either creative people or organizations together, and they start mutually enhancing each other. We came up with the term Creative Cluster 2.0, where we say it's not only creative people in terms of creative professions, but it's really every person is a creator, and we could help him or her unlock their potential, both on the level of individual level and on the level of a company and on the level of a territory or a city. And not only we can do it in a one locality, but as Louis mentioned, 100 schools, we also think about a network of creative clusters. So basically a way of interlocking in offline and online reality, a group or an increasingly large group of creative spaces and projects. And our goal is basically integrally developing individual, society, and the territory. So a very specific project we are working on right now, it's called Creative Quarter, the heart of Ijevsk. Ijevsk is a city of 650,000 people, sort of in the middle of Russia. There is a challenge. It's economic stagnation. It's not bad, it's pretty okay, but it's not really growing. So there is some stagnation. Talents and capitals are leaving the city, also not a big problem, but definitely a trend which we all notice. But what we try to do for many years is to develop a city. And then we realize that it's very hard to develop a city, even 600,000 people, because there are not enough resources, not enough talents, leadership energy, willpower to develop the whole city at once. And so we decided, and we found this solution. We chose a territory about 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer in the very center of the city, with high density of advanced thinking owners and stakeholders. And together we decided to create this creative quarter based on the idea of lifelong integral development, where we unlock inner potential of individuals, organizations, and the city as a large sort of living organisms to create economic and social prosperity. So key principles, I won't mention all of them, but the most important one is that every human is a creator by birth. We get this energy when we're born. It's flowing through us on a moment-to-moment basis. If we are open to it, most people are not open to it. And if you know, there is this Gallup Institute, I think the largest sort of research body in the world, and they made this research, and between 80 and 90%, depending on the country, between 80 and 90% of people, they feel unhappy in their workplace. They feel they are not living their life. So 4/5 or 9/10, so 9 people out of 10 do not feel that they live their life and they are not happy in their workplace. It means that the energy, this life energy, the creative life energy or life force, right? It doesn't flow through people in a really sort of authentic manner. So there is a lot of loss, and we're trying to sort of scrap and get some resources without really living our life and being fully productive in what we do. So this is a key principle, and thinking about our learning ecosystem, the first step with every person, that I'll show what kind of people we're working with, is to really run a diagnostic and see where they are in their life, how happy they are, because happiness is really the free flow of energy. If people are living their true potential and their sort of life purpose, the life energy flows through them in a very sort of free fashion, and they feel happy most of the time. They feel productive, they feel being sort of part of life rather than being alienated from life and from other people. So we start with diagnostic, and then we help people find their talents, discover what makes their heart think, and so on and so forth. There are different methods for this. And then we create the environment for unlocking and realizing and capitalizing on their potential, because many educational people talk only about how to unlock, so how to show people what they're destined for, what are their talents, then to sort of develop it to the level of master. But very few educational systems start talking about how to monetize and capitalize their talents. And this is very important. We see now in today's world, if we don't talk about it, and I didn't talk about it for many, many years of my life, I sort of was above it. But now we see that it doesn't provide people with, with sustainability, and they could unlock their talents, but then they sort of live without money, their families are struggling, the whole city is very sort of poor. And so we realize that we need to do both unlocking the potential, but then also helping people to capitalize on it. So what we are working with, as I mentioned, this is a very specific part of the territory. You can see it sort of on a map, and it's a picture from above. The right part is basically commercial, how it's called, real estate, different type of commercial real estate. And the left side, it's been now built sort of a high-rise type of city downtown area. So it will be mostly residential real estate. And in terms of a map on a city, the yellow part is this creative quarter is the heart of Ijevsk. It's really located in the heart, and we use this metaphor to show that it's very dynamic on a moment-to-moment basis, right? There are a lot of energy, or there will be a lot of energy there, and it's starting already. But also the heart, you know, it helps distribute blood across the whole body. So we say that this heart of Ijevsk will work with all of the different parts of the city, but then also with the eco-region, but then the country and also the world, to create those connections, exchange practices, exchange ideas, resources, run network collaborative projects, etc. Some of you know Emir Kusturica. He was visiting one of our events, and he said, as you know, he created this Kustendorf village in Serbia, I guess, or maybe not Serbia, but somewhere around Serbia. So he said, if you want your city to be alive, you should understand what's its source of energy, what's its concept, what activities will take place there. And so the idea which sort of gives life to our whole project is the integral development ecosystem, which I mentioned, and that's why basically I'm here today with us. And we believe that acting together, we can create environment that helps unlock our creative potential for each person, each organization, and the city overall to create prosperity. So when we're thinking about Montenegro, I would definitely look into those ideas and see how we can do it in Montenegro as well, really work with all different types of people and organizations and look deep into their potential and help to unlock it. So the vision we have for our project is that in 4 years, this area becomes a new city center. Right now it's a geographical center, but what's important is that it's center of social and economic activity. And we developed this ecosystem. I won't read all those words. I will send the presentation so everybody could get it, of course. And what's important is that it becomes a very sort of alive part of the city. And so it starts attracting residents, right? So the economic activity comes there. It starts attracting startups in different areas of creative economy. We believe that the traffic in the city not in the city, but in this area will increase twofold, because people will be attracted to both spend their time there, to work there, to meet there, and do many other things. And we believe that this quarter will become an engine, that developmental engine that will serve the whole city, region, country, and the world, of course. Those are some numbers. On the left, the situation today, and then at 4 years, there are about 300 companies with 5,000 staff members in this area today. So it's comparable to a very small sort of city. But also there are 5,000 inhabitants today, and it will grow to 25,000 when they build all those high rises. So it will be a small city within a city, about 30 to 35,000 people. And then on an annual basis, there are much more than 100,000 guests who come through this part of the town. So altogether, we want to work with every one of those people in both offline and online environments. So whoever comes in contact with this creative quarter, right, we invite them through many different ways to run those diagnostics, right? How happy they are, how productive they are, do they sort of realize their potential? And then, of course, no violence, right? No sort of push approach. We sort of pull them into the idea that they could live better, their children could live better, their families could live better, their companies could be more productive. And we invite them, we create this culture of lifelong sort of integral development, which means, you remember, developing our body, our energy, our individuality, our intelligence, our soul, or rather unlocking our soul, and of course our spirit. And we believe that this type of approach will allow what we call the living system of this particular quarter, right, of this sort of area, to really start to flourish. Of course, it will take a few years, so step by step, but this is what we are looking at. We created a very specific team right away. So it was interesting. I was looking what Ross was mentioning as the steps, and I found out that we went through all of them sort of intuitively. We didn't have any system, but we also created this sort of the core team with a strategic and operational management, and it includes the mayor of the city and many sort of prominent entrepreneurs and also non-for-profit organization leaders. We also created a core team, which is the operational team, which works on a day-to-day basis. Some of them work with sort of salary, and the other decided to work as their contribution to the development of the city. And then we have an institute of curators from all across the country and also from other countries in the world. And Pavel Lukshev, who is speaking today, is one of those curators, but there are also other people from United States, Netherlands, Scotland, Great Britain, Russia, and etc. And each one of them provides a very specific expertise in one or another important sort of area. We developed and we are constantly growing a group of partners. So we're weaving this ecosystem of support in different areas, in creative economy, in education, in integral development, in architecture, and many different other fields. So those are the people who really bring their expertise, but also their connections and resources. And the reason why they collaborate with us, most of them collaborate without any financial sort of contribution from our side at this point, is because they see that it's a very sort of, advanced experiment. And so it's interesting for them to also apply their skills, their sort of, ideas, their wisdom to bring it something forward which has never been there before. So for Montenegro, I think it's also very important to not only do usual things, but also be very unusual, create non-standard solutions, and really be a pioneer, try, despite the fact that today it's basically a touristic and rural, a little bit destination, really try to jump high and really go beyond some very developed nations and look which sort of areas you can really do it. That's my perspective. In terms of the goals, so we're creating this learning ecosystem, we're creating this network, distributed creative cluster to create a thriving creative economy. The city attracts talent and investments, and we create, or rather we...
Sorry, Lev?
Yes? Almost done.
Could you please conclude? Because we need to have a summary, and then we have break. And now, if it's possible to finish within like 30 seconds, and then we will have a summary of the day. Thank you.
I can do it in 15 seconds. So creating global network of hubs with mutual support. So we are happy to collaborate with Montenegro. Ecosystem design, you can read through it later on, but we used many different formats and many different actors. The key actor is every individual. And this is sort of the heart of new creative economy as we see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lev. We will definitely continue to digest what you have said together with the lunch we're going to have soon.
Bon appetit.
And before the big 2 hours break, I want to invite our head moderator, Lika